Welcome to the Malta Chamber podcast. This marks the sixth and final episode of our six-part series in relation to scam, fraud, cybersecurity, and investment frauds, produced in collaboration with BOV. Whether you are managing an established organization or company, or just started your new adventure, this series provides a better understanding of how you can prevent your company to get scammed or fraud. In previous episodes, we've heard experts speaking about how businesses can mitigate such situations. We've heard stories of how local businesses and people at large ended up victims from these perpetrators. And now, for the concluding discussion today, we will be focusing on establishing a forward-thinking approach to these challenges. And to do this, I have with me Dr Marthese Portelli, the Malta Chamber CEO, and Kenneth Farrugia, the CEO of BOV. I would like to start with you, Marthese. How do you see local businesses developing in terms of their awareness and their digital platforms?
Keeping in mind the fast pace with which technology develops, I would say that no matter how much you do, you have never done enough. Having said that as well, when we look at the profile of our businesses in Malta, it seems that investment on the technology side, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity, merits more attention. So I believe that that is one of the first things that needs to be addressed. And this is also precisely why, together with BOV, we have launched these information sessions, this awareness raising, so that businesses understand why it is important to budget yearly, budget properly, to make sure that they are protected against scams and other frauds.
What's the experience, Kenneth, with local businesses? Do you see that they have the same issue?
As Marta said, undoubtedly the evolution or revolution of technological developments has changed the landscape, and particularly when it comes to banking services. And we've seen, I'd say, over the last 3 to 4 decades, a proliferation of digital channels through which customers can transact. Now, this has driven efficiency at the business level, but it also has opened up a new breed of criminality in terms of the way that scams, phishing, spoofing, smishing, and all these new vocabulary has hit us over the last few years, is now permeating our day-to-day life. I consider that the evolution of technology is no different than how we take care of ourselves, to simplify it, right? So the analogy is health checks. And we do health checks, right, to ensure our well-being as humans. And the same goes with technology. So the minute you start doing or entering into new platforms to do technological driven transactions, you need to ensure that you have the right cybersecurity around that. So when we moved into the email domain, right, which means that you can have hackers permeate the platform and send illicit instructions, right, you need to ensure that you have the right security around those servers to ensure that you minimize the probability, I would say the possibility of those penetrating your systems. So really and truly, when I look at how businesses used to operate and the way they are operating today, so have criminals. So whilst criminals used to go and rob banks, if I look at the banking sector, right, and look at branches and try to find the weak spots of security in the physical domain, now they've shifted to the digital domain, right? And they're seeing in what way they can penetrate banks, and banks have been cyber attacked. But more so now, this is going down the route of our customers as well, where they are trying to understand what are the vulnerabilities in the systems that our customers operate, whether it's mail servers, whether it's the use of data, and we see ransomware, increasingly jeopardizing businesses. And this is why the first thing one needs to ask, in a board meeting of a company, or if you are a sole trader running a business, what is the extent of cybersecurity I have around my business?
Why do you think that the bank should get involved in such a matter? Because one would say, why is he going into this?
Look, two fronts. One, the interest of our client is absolutely the interest of the bank. So we want customers that are engaging with the bank to conduct their banking transactions. We want them to have the confidence to do so. And undoubtedly, if you look at the extent of over-the-counter transactions 10, 15, 20 years ago, and look at that percentage today, it's single digit. It's actually less than 5%. So the majority of transactions are done through digital channels. So it is in our interest not to jeopardize that traction in terms of customers that feel comfortable in using, digital functionality to execute their day-to-day requirements, as against the inconvenience of having to go to a physical branch to conduct transactions. So that's our first interest. Secondly, particularly for customers that have both assets with the bank, but equally they have credit financing solutions through the bank, so they have both deposits or investments and loans. The interest of our customer in terms of the customer being able to sustain their repayment obligations is our interest as well. Because if, say, a customer is hit with ransomware and it blocks his business for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or has to pay a significant amount to settle that ransomware attack, then that might jeopardize the credit risk of that customer, because that customer will be unable to repay his obligations to the bank. So we have the interest of our customers firsthand, but we need to ensure and support our customers in being more sensitive to the need to ensure that he protects the value of his business, because that value is in the bank's interest as well. Whether they have deposits with the banks, because if those deposits go out of the bank is losing out, or whether the customer is financing his projects through the bank, and that customer is jeopardized again in being able to repay back the bank. So there is this mutuality in the interest of the bank protecting its customers, and we have invested in systems, both pre-transaction monitoring in particular and post, but with the pre-transaction monitoring controls we have put in place, we have managed to really stem a number of transactions that the customer had authorized unknowingly that they were scams, and we managed to stop them rather than these going to the fraudsters. So that's our interest, to protect the customers. Undoubtedly, it's like having, and the analogy is like having a card, right? If I give my PIN number to a fraudster, he'll go with the card and withdraw it. Same thing if you give your credentials to your mobile banking or internet banking. You're giving the customer the key, right, to operate your platform.
Marthese, both Kenneth and as well you as the CEO of the Chamber, you have been all the time emphasizing the idea of checks and balances and good governance. Why is this so important? Why do you keep on pushing on this issue?
Unless you have proper processes in place, which is what good governance and proper governance is all about, you will likely fall within the crevice. So if we were to see how these attacks are launched, they are launched in a very, very clever and intelligent way, that it is very easy to get carried away and not realize exactly what is happening in the meantime. So we do get unsolicited emails, we get emails with attachments and links, but we are also getting a lot of very, very accurate impersonation. So this is why it is very important to make sure that there are full governance structures in place. Proper governance works across the board everywhere. So it's not only in the cyber of digital and the cyber security, but across all the levels that are required. Kenneth earlier on mentioned and made reference to handing out your credentials to possibly even people within your organization. There are reasons why there are different levels of authorization. There are reasons why, for example, the CEO gets the initial kick to start a transaction or whether he is the last person to close off a transaction. So it is very important that everybody keeps his or her credentials to themselves, because it's a responsibility that you have to carry. It is a responsibility that has been passed on to the person because of the knowledge, because of the know-how, because of the experience. And therefore, it is why it's important to have this regular and proper governance in place. So whilst I can understand that management or even any employee within a company may feel that the process is cumbersome, and though at times there will be instances where somebody might feel that it is more worthwhile for the company if he invests his time working on, let's say, attracting clients rather than doing the final approval of payments, one needs to also understand why that person was given the responsibility of actually doing the last endorsement required to carry out a process.
Why do you think the businesses are kind of sometimes, maybe the word resisting or not being knowledgeable enough to do training themselves and to train the people that do this type of jobs in their organizational structure?
The main issue is that there might not be enough awareness of how big issues are. The reality is that it is in our innate nature that we feel that it will never hit me. It will hit everybody else, but not me. The reality is that you will bear the brunt once it actually hits you. And in today's cyber world, everybody is a target. And the more you think that you will not be the next person to be attacked, the likelihood is that the more you are going to be attacked. And the reasoning is that cyber criminals have a lot of intelligence, and they would also know who and where their weakest links are. What is important to note as well is that cyber attacks do not necessarily happen on specific companies to fraud that specific company, but there is also what is called as the conduit. So if I am detected as a weakest link, as a weak link, I could be attacked so that I act as a conduit to get through to a company whose information is more valuable to the cyber criminals. So in reality, we are all connected to one another. And this is why we have to bear responsibility, not only for the company we are operating in, but even towards responsibility towards the wider society and the other peer companies as well.
Kenneth, both yourself, a few minutes ago, you mentioned it, but also during our podcasts, the various podcasts we did, people from BOV were saying, listen, it's very difficult to retrieve the funds. Now, my question to you is why? Why is it so difficult? Because the business person will tell you, if I sent it to point B, why can't you bring it back?
Yes, because it does not end at point B. The quick answer to that would be. So it's amazing that fraudsters would create an architecture around the way that they will mobilize money from one account to the other. Ordinarily, they would normally transfer money to one account, but once that money hits that account, they then start shifting from one account to the other in different countries and different jurisdictions, normally ending up in a jurisdiction where they don't have the level of sophistication of regulation like we have in mainland Europe, where cash is still king. These accounts would be opened fraudulently, using fraudulent documents. The fraudster would go in with a fraudulent document and withdraw the amount. And this happens in sometimes...
the jurisdiction, saying not in a few.
In minutes. Really, it happens in minutes. Sometimes it's not that dynamic, so sometimes it's from point A to point B, and they would withdraw it from point B, right? Albeit it's a fraudulent account. And sometimes they do take their time, and that time gap, and it's maybe the lethargy of fraudsters really getting out that money, allows us to block that account, right? But if you look at the magnitude of scams, and this has become a multi-billion industry, if I can call it so, right? There are today quite sophisticated criminals being involved in this sector. So we're not talking about the traditional robber that used to go to a branch and try to get money from a branch, right? These are sophisticated technical people that are undertaking these fraudulent transactions. So they are well prepared. They're not doing this with the left hand. They are well prepared, well organized, with accounts sometimes in different jurisdictions, and the money moves very, very quickly. We do get occasions where we manage to retrieve the funds, because sometimes we engage with the bank if that bank is in the correspondent banking circle of the bank. And if it's not, because it's one of the European banks which we don't have a correspondent relation, we need to introduce ourselves that this is the Anti-Financial Crime Office of Bank of Valletta. We've processed a transaction for a client, it has hit your accounts, but they would want to verify, right, that it is true.
So time is passing, and
time is passing, right?
So,
and this is why, it needs not just collaboration at European banking level, but if you look at the nature of these scams coming in, the telcos should be involved in the process, because obviously they're a conduit to notifications, through spoofing going into customers' mailboxes or SMS inbox. It needs the involvement of regulators, right? That they should enable institutions to be able to share information very, very quickly between them. So speed is of the essence here. The flip side of this is that technology is bringing about the faster processing of transactions, right? So why today with SEPA, you may be T+0 or T+1, so there is that time up until that transaction is settled. With instant payments, in seconds, right?
Go into that.
So it does pose a challenge, which means that before processing a transaction blindly, and believe me, and I endorse what Marthese was saying earlier, if you look at the typologies of customers that have been scammed, some of these all operate in the banking sector, in the financial sector, C-suite, senior management, middle management. There is no particular typology, but there are clear indicators of what a fraudulent transaction could look like, right? So if there's urgency in the message, and sometimes your card is blocked, okay, you just need to check whether your card is blocked on your mobile banking app, right? And you'll notice immediately. Or SMS is received that you have a DHL package. Have you really ordered a DHL package? And we've been saying this over and over again, that these SMS notifications are coming from DHL and Malta Post and quite a host of others. Then shouldn't you be sensitive to the fact that this could be a fraudulent message? And that the overarching requirement, never give your credentials, if not through the website of the bank, the mobile banking and internet banking channel of the bank. Never. So that's the overarching rule. Having said that, I can assure you, on a daily basis, we have people that share their credentials through links they receive through emails or through SMSs or through WhatsApp, and these would be ingenious notifications, right, that urge someone to act. I think it's the instant gratification mindset today that you want to do it now, right? That you want to execute it. And this is normally what customers tell us. I received it, I was busy, I executed and I gave my credentials. And then they realize, wow, I didn't authorize a €5,000 transaction, right, from my account.
Marthese, Kenneth just mentioned that they are trying to build their circle internationally so that they minimize the fraud itself, the theft itself. But the reality is that we need to zoom a bit locally as well, because locally we do have cases as well of fraudsters, local fraudsters, as we're seeing even in the news. Is the Malta Chamber happy with the setup that there is nationally at the moment, or more needs to be done on this regard?
Definitely more needs to be done. And I'll start my reply by mentioning some shocking statistics as well. So there are over €2.6 billion being scammed every day worldwide, and 233 million per day within the EU. Malta as well gets its share of scams. So what we think should be done amongst a number of other initiatives which are directly targeted to help businesses up their cyber infrastructure, their cyber processes, etc. So to go for prevention and proactiveness rather than reacting once one is in trouble. We also believe that there should be a national public agency which would specifically focus on the subject, act as a main point of contact also for businesses to help them and support them in, first of all, preferably avoiding to fall to these threats, but secondly, even to guide them exactly as to what needs to be done once they are attacked.
Who should be on it?
Exactly, I was coming to that. When I'm saying it needs to be a public agency, I'm not saying it needs to be a government agency. So because there are multiple players and multiple stakeholders that need to be involved in it. So at a national level, we have multiple entities, multiple committees, which include various stakeholders. And I believe that this national entity, this national agency, which would safeguard and plan for the protection of our country in terms of cybersecurity, needs to include various people. So apart from people representative of government, there should definitely be a stakeholder from the financial services, including the banks, entities that represent businesses as well, and even the general citizen at large. But the main focus of this national agency is not only to draw policy and to raise awareness, but to be the first point of contact where you need to go and get all your questions answered. As it is at the moment, it is quite sporadic. So an individual might contact the bank immediately. Another individual might try to get through the police. And we all know it's not easy to get through to the cybercrime unit, though in all fairness, with the resources that they have, they are doing quite a good job. But is it enough? No, it is not enough. Particularly keeping in mind how sophisticated these threats are. So we need to be constantly ahead of the curve. I believe also that this agency needs to be very well resourced on technical expertise to not only know what's happening currently, but also to be forward-looking and anticipating what could be happening in the future. This is not only a business risk, it is not only a customer risk. The way I see it, it is a national security risk, especially in today's world where data is everything. So imagine if we as a nation were to be compromised as well.
Mm-hmm. Kenneth, I know that you have also spoken about this. What's the bank's view on it?
No, absolutely. I think the banking sector in general cybersecurity is very high on the agenda of board of directors today. Because clearly banks are gatekeepers of customer assets, customer information. And, if a bank is hacked, and the bank was hacked 7 years ago in 2018, and you can imagine the ramifications of that. So even at European level, from a regulatory standpoint, cybersecurity stress tests are conducted with the banks. There is a sharing of learning experiences out of these stress tests. Regulators review cybersecurity plans for banks because they want to ensure that the banks are well protected from the onset of cybercrime. But then when it comes to the industry in general, as Marthese was saying, there are various stakeholders that have a responsibility, I say, not a responsibility really and truly, to ensure that they are contributing their subject matter expertise on this field, together with those in the banking sector, together with those on the security side when it comes to the police, together with those of the regulators, because it's all about understanding the typology of threats that an economy like ours is facing, both through scams at the personal level and those at businesses, and understand what controls need to be strengthened to minimize the incidence of frauds taking place. As I always say, this is we will try to minimize the impact of particular battles. The war will never be won because cybersecurity crime will evolve and change. And it's amazing we see that. So once we see a pattern of fraudulent transactions happening, we are able to include controls that will minimize the impact of that fraud happening. And we have managed really to stop quite a significant number of transactions which customers had authorized, but which we found out that these would not be typically the transaction that the customer would be doing. And the customer said, no, I did not mean to authorize that transaction, right? But, and the reality is that once you block those, you will note that other types of scams are happening. Different forms of scams are happening. So once you close that loop, right, to close that entry point, they will create another one and another one. And this is why the speed of circulating information about scam typologies is critical. First of all, because you educate the market. So today, I think anyone receiving an SMS which says DHL or multiple, they will say, oh, I need to check whether this is legitimate or otherwise. Why? Because those are the typologies. And what we're seeing is that those types of communications have gone down. So fraudsters are saying people are recognizing that these are scams, but they'll create new ones. And you'd be surprised how creative they become. We run internal tests with our employees because we want our employees to be protected. And we recently ran one. We're very pleased with how hard you're working. We're giving you a €100 voucher. Just click here and register for this, so we'll send it to you. And some people fell for that because ordinarily this is something that we would want to recognize employees, and we do recognize employees with awards. And, so they can really blend into the way that you're recognizing employees and try to come up with an ingenious way to scam an employee or enter a phishing link in the email. You click on it and suddenly, hey presto, you've opened the door for the fraudster.
Now let me make your life more complicated. On the 6th of October, we saw the introduction of the instant payment. So on the one hand, the bank is trying to educate people to think twice, to click, and to have all the processes in place. But yet, there is the instant payment now. Don't you feel this is a bit of a contradiction?
No, not really. It does not obviate the need that you ensure that what you are processing is what you want to process at the outset. So the evolution around payments with PSD2 and PSD3 has brought about greater efficiency in processing transactions. I remember in my heydays, we used to wait days and weeks up until a payment was processed from one entity to the other. And you can imagine that this would be a drag on business, right? So the drive towards more efficiency in payments. Let me give you an example. We're signing a contract for the sale of a property, and I come to you, as is the case till today, or was till today, and I give you a check, and then you take that check and you go to the bank and you credit that. I'm not talking about digital payments, the use of checks. Now with instant payment, we're all sitting in a room, buyer and seller, you agree on a price, I process the transaction, you see it on your account, you sign on the dotted line. So, and that's what the efficiency should be all about. So for me, the development of efficiency in the payments infrastructure is needed because we still, to a degree, have a fragmented payment infrastructure, and instant payments is in part addressing that. You want me to pay you? Mobile, send, you receive it, it's in your account, right? That does not reduce the need to ensure that what I am processing is what truly I want to process, right? So if I give my credentials to someone else at the outset, whether it's through instant payments or it's done through the traditional route, I'm weak in giving my credentials when I shouldn't. And I think banks have been saying all over and all over again, never give your credentials for your internet banking to a third party. And even if it's purported to be from the bank never asks you for these credentials. Those are yours, and you use them when you enter into our internet banking or you use our mobile banking. You give them to no one else. That's the overarching rule. So the fact that the transaction is being processed instantly, right? Obviously, it creates a risk that if you're duped to do that, your chances of recovery are slim because the money would have gone there. I'm not saying it can't be blocked, and there shouldn't be systems to enable banks to speak with each other to block transactions when they are notified. But sometimes criminals are very agile, very swift. They know that if banks talk together, that amount will be blocked. So they will move that quickly, that money very, very quickly, right? So I think it's the overarching rule of you need to be careful what you're processing. You need to be careful that your credentials are not given to anyone else except utilized by your own self. That's the rule. Right? The fact that we're driving efficiency is warranted. And we have to look at it from the greater good point of view, right? Because there are fraudulent transactions. but they are relatively a small percentage of the legitimate transactions that we process each and every day. So if I were to reverse that question, should we penalize those that are processing legitimate transactions? Because you are not undertaking the proper checks and balances when processing a transaction. Yeah. So it's true, like everything in life, technology brings a lot of value to businesses, and we're seeing that. And with artificial intelligence, it will bring a lot of value. It brings challenges. And as Marta said beforehand, from a corporate level, ensuring you have the appropriate governance and control frameworks to manage these risks, right? If you don't do that, you're at risk. And the call is make sure that you have the proper control frameworks in the organization to minimize the incidence of fraudulent transactions happening.
Marthese, what's the view of the Malta Chamber when it comes to instant payment?
Exactly what Kenneth said, basically. It's something that we need, but it puts on more responsibility on the person who is actually paying. So just as before we were mentioning having proper governance structures to ensure that your cyber framework is correct, we need to be careful on this front as well. I mean, we are developing technologically. It makes our life easier and faster on a number of fronts, but like everything else in life, it brings with it additional set of responsibilities.
I know the answer, but I'm going to have to ask it because in previous episodes, this question was even raised by some of our social media people, comments on the board, and they said, maybe we should rethink and go back to a cash-based society.
God forbid. It brings about another set of risks we used to experience in the past. And I think,
I would go nuts because you never find me cash in my wallet.
No, God forbid. We should not stifle progress and development at all. Or what we should do is be more sensitive that we should have the right controls in place to manage risks. Even if you're going down that road, God forbid we ever go there, right? You're still running the risk that you're walking around with bags of cash, going to deposit them in a bank, and criminals will adapt to that. And I think that will make it easier, right? Because you can't have security if you're walking with a bag of cash and going to the bank to deposit it, right? So there will always be risks. Risks in their very nature change over time, and you need to ensure that your controls and your security is mitigating those risks.
Marthese, last question. The Malta Chamber has been very much advocate about training not only yourself, but the people around you. In such situations, what should the business community do and what's your message to them?
Okay, so for the past 4 years in our pre-budget document, we have always put forward a number of recommendations of how businesses can be supported. On this front, we believe that we need to go also beyond training when it comes to business support. So what we are proposing from our end is that we need to support companies from the beginning of the process till the end. And by beginning of the process, I mean helping companies to take stock of their current status quo. So we have mapped out the entire process. A company needs to take stock of its current status quo, what it has, what it is, what are its risks, then move on to look at its processes and rehash them as required. Then comes the part where there needs to be the actual cyber infrastructure set up and having the right technical people and training, etc. on board. Now, this is very costly. And here I would also like to give some advice to businesses. Do not go for cheap solutions. Do not go for the cheapest solutions. Ask what is being covered. Verify, especially when you ask for quotes and there is a big difference in the price. What we are doing, though, in this year's pre-budget, we have specifically asked for support on all these 4 fronts, which can be in the form of tax credits. They can be in the form of vouchers, which equate to roughly giving back to businesses 80% of their cost. And we would also like to see the designing of a scheme similar to that of the electric vehicles, where the amount of interest being paid on the loan to buy your electric vehicle was practically next to zero. So what we are saying, let's adapt that model to the critical digital infrastructure that we need to have as a country.
Dr. Portelli, Kenneth Farrugia, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. Listeners wishing to contact us on such matters can do so by calling on 21312020. I repeat, 21312020. All communication will be handled with respect for privacy. May I remind you also that you can follow the previous podcasts that we did on scam and fraud by clicking on either the Malta Chamber website and then you go and click on podcasts. You can also go on the Spotify and look for our channel there. And also you can go on our social media platforms and as well BOV social media platforms, and there you can find the previous episodes as well. I encourage you not to only listen to these podcasts yourselves, but also to share it with your employees and with your family members. Thank you for staying with us and tune in for the next one.